everyone, hope you are good and be happy always. In this video, we will discuss deficient demand and excess demand. We have already discussed the concept of deficient demand, concept of employment, full employment, unemployment, natural unemployment, cyclical unemployment, voluntary, involuntary unemployment, etc. And along with that, we have discussed surplus unemployment, frictional unemployment, etc. Okay, so in this video, we will discuss the deficient demand, excess demand in detail, measurement of deficient demand and excess demand, causes and consequences of both the excess and your deficient demand. So please watch that video, that is part 1 of this video, before watching this video, otherwise you won't be able to understand it clearly. Okay, you all already know that utility of demand in economy. If demand is high, employment is high. We have already discussed. Please watch that video. Okay, so for every economy, to create employment, we need demand. So if demand is deficient, your employment will also fall, and that is the condition which every economy wants to avoid. So what is deficient demand? The definition of deficient demand here is Keynes has given, John Maynard Keynes, J.M. Keynes has given this definition, that is aggregate demand is deficient when it is less than aggregate supply. Okay. Corresponding to full employment level. We have already discussed full employment level. What is that? Can we revise? Yes. Full employment level is the level of employment where people who are willing to work and able to work at existing wage rates are getting jobs. That is the full utilization of economy is full utilization of resources in economy is ensured, and all the resources of the economy are fully utilized. That is level of full employment in any type of economy. Please watch that video in detail. Okay, so here we need to see that aggregate demand is deficient when it is less than aggregate supply at the level of full employment level. So we need to discuss the measurement first. For discussing the measurement, we have to draw the diagram here. Okay, so diagram is here, that is we have drawn OY axis and OX axis. Can we draw it once again over here? So draw two axes over here. This is OX axis. I am drawing it in rough so that you can understand. So we have drawn two axes, OX axis and OY axis, and then take O as origin and draw a 45-degree line. Okay, 45-degree line. You have drawn this. This is your 45-degree line. That is OY. That is aggregate supply curve. This is your aggregate supply curve, and it is also your income curve in economy. And we have taken income or GDP, gross domestic product, at our OX axis. So GDP is here or income is here. We use Y for income. That's very clear. Then on OY axis we are measuring aggregate demand, right? So this is your aggregate supply curve, right? This is very simple. Up till now you have understood. Now you have to draw a curve ADF. What is ADF? Aggregate demand at full employment level. Full employment. That means full utilization of resources is taking place, and no one who wants to work, willing to work at existing wage rates is unemployed. So full utilization of resources occurs at F. OF. So we will draw it here. So here A. Take some point A over here. Take one point A. I am taking it here. A point is taken, and from this A point draw a line like this. This is the curve ADF. ADF, that means aggregate demand. AD for aggregate demand, AS for aggregate supply. This is income curve also, so aggregate supply curve also. So here ADF, what is that? Aggregate demand at full employment level where all the resources are utilized. Now, this is the intersection point of aggregate supply and aggregate demand. That is supply and demand of whole economy. And here we name this point as point E. Here we have named this point E. Now this is intersection point. From this intersection point, you can drop a perpendicular or you can draw a line that touches your OX axis or GDP or income axis here. We have dropped a perpendicular. So what is this level? This is full employment level of your GDP. That is, we can name it F. F for full employment. To make it easy, I am naming them. See, you don't have to worry about these points E, A, F. You can name them on your own also. You don't have to memorize them from your book or from my this diagram. You can name on your own, whatever name you think is right. So this is full employment level. I have named it OF. So OF, what is that? OF level of GDP is the GDP where all the resources in economy are utilized and no one who wants to work is unemployed. Okay, here we have done this. Now, this is full employment level of aggregate demand. Now, what is deficient demand? We need to see now. Now what we will do, we will take another point B over here and we will draw a line below this aggregate demand curve. This is aggregate demand curve. Now below this we will draw another line. So aggregate demand curve here, that is aggregate demand P. What is P? That is planned expenditure of people which they plan to go for in any particular year or any particular time of period. Okay, period of time, sorry. So what will happen? What is happening? This is planned expenditure or planned aggregate demand and this is full employment aggregate demand. So planned aggregate demand is lesser than your full employment level aggregate demand. So here the demand, this, now we can name this point here. So now intersection is occurring at which point? You can name it as, we have already seen F, so you can say it as G. G is the point where aggregate demand and aggregate supply are intersecting, but this is less than full employment level. So the level of, or the extent, the measurement of demand which is less than full employment level here. What does this? This is the gap, this is the distance. This distance, you see, this distance is the deficient demand. Here what you can do, you can just see over here, this area, this particular line, this is deficient demand. Okay, so E is the point over here and you can name is at P, EP. So EP is your deficient demand, EP. This distance between aggregate demand at full employment level, which is corresponding to aggregate supply at your full employment level, it is intersecting, is less than your aggregate demand at full employment, and this is the gap between aggregate demand, planned aggregate demand and full employment aggregate demand. Whenever planned aggregate demand is less than full employment level aggregate demand, there is deficiency in demand or scarcity or demand is less. Okay, and it does not ensure full employment of your all the resources. So here we can see this is the gap. We can see this gap. I am again naming at EP. EP is the gap. EP is the gap which is deficient demand. So what is this? This is deficient demand. D, deficient demand. Okay. This is deficient demand and this is also known as deflationary gap because owing to this deficient demand, deflation is happening in economy or depression or recession is happening in economy. That's why it is known as deflationary gap also. So deficient demand also is known as deflationary gap. So it's clear to you people? Right now we will make it understand later on. We'll come to this diagram once again. Now the causes of deficient demand we need to discuss first. In two-sector economy and in four-sector economy also. In two-sector economy, only household and firms are included. We have already discussed this in our previous videos, so you can watch those videos. So in two-sector economy, only household and firms are included here. Reduction in private consumption, expenditure. So whenever expenditure, I have told you when demand is high, employment is high or there is no deficiency of demand. So if reduction in private consumption expenditure happens, that is C. Private consumption expenditure is denoted by C. C is written here. So if this lessens or this becomes less or it reduces, it causes your deficient demand. See, what is consumption expenditure? Whenever we spend our money on items like consumer goods like bread, biscuit or books or stationery or our clothes or food, etc., that is consumption expenditure. But except houses, if we buy a house, that is not known as consumption expenditure. It is investment expenditure. Okay, so whatever we spend on such type of items, our daily utilities or consumption items, that is known as consumption expenditure. Now reduction in Private investment expenditure. Private investment expenditure is for business purposes, on plant and machinery for production purposes, and if this also reduces, that means our expenditure is reducing, that means demand for consumption goods is increasing, decreasing or reducing, or demand for your production goods is decreasing, plant and machinery is decreasing, and this will cause deficient demand. In four sector economy, what are the causes of deficient demand in any economy? Maybe it be India, America, or China, or any other economy. Reduction in government expenditure. What forms of government expenditure do you know? We have already discussed in our previous videos. That is investment of government on infrastructure services like building roads, hospitals, or airports, etc. Or your expenditure on old age pensions, or your that is unemployment allowances, etc., or subsidies, etc. is there. Then decline in exports. Here, decline in exports, that means we are not able to export more to other nations, and we are not earning good amount of foreign exchange from that. So in that case also there will be deficient demand in economy. Then rise in imports. If we are importing more in our economy, that will also cause deficient demand. Why? We are spending more on other goods or other goods from other economies. So in that case also we are giving our income to other nations. We are not giving our income to our producers. So our producers are incurring losses, and producers of America, China, or other nations are gaining profits from our economy. In that case also, if imports are increased in our economy, we are buying goods of other nations. In that case also our demand is increasing. That means demand for products of our nation is decreasing. Okay, say for India, say for example, you are not buying the products of India, okay, and you are buying the products of say for example America. So what will happen? Producers of India will incur losses, and producers of America will gain profit. Okay, so this is profit for America and loss for India. If India will incur losses, what will happen? Producers will incur losses. There will be job cuts, right? Because there is deficient demand for Indian products. Clear? Now, rise in imports, we have discussed. Increase in tax rates. If taxes like income taxes increase, indirect taxes, that is taxes on goods and services like GST is increased, in that case also people spend less, because owing to taxation their income is reduced, their purchasing power gets reduced, and they are not able to buy more. So if taxes are more, then also there will be deficient demand. Say for example, if there is high tax on purchasing cars, so demand for cars will be reduced. Or if there is high percentage of tax on your going restaurant products, or going to restaurants, or on foreign trips, etc., anything you can say. So in that case also your demand will get reduced, and there will be deficient demand in economy. So these are the causes in two sector economy and four sector economy. Now consequences of deficient demand. What happens when there is deficient demand? Underemployment equilibrium. So we need to discuss underemployment equilibrium. So we have already discussed equilibrium at full employment level in our previous video. You can watch that video. So equilibrium, that means where aggregate demand and aggregate supply are equal. But at underemployment, that means some of the resources in economy are not fully utilized, and we have underutilized resources or unutilized resources, and some people in our economy are unemployed. Okay, so here we need to see the underemployment equilibrium, where see, this is at E point we have full employment equilibrium. We have already discussed. Now I am drawing it here. At point G, where aggregate demand, planned aggregate demand is intersecting with aggregate supply curve here. This is aggregate supply curve, 45-degree line, right? And here this is aggregate demand curve where they are intersecting. This is point G. This is point G. So here we will draw a line from G and touch with our x-axis, and here this is, you can put any point M, you can say M. So GM, this line GM, and M represents your underemployment equilibrium output in economy, the GDP of underemployment level, or this point is underemployment equilibrium. G is your underemployment equilibrium. What will happen? Some of the resources in an economy will be underutilized. So here we can see this over here, M. So M is the point where your all the resources are not utilized. Now, deflationary gap will happen if there is deficient demand. It will lead to deflationary gap, and I have already told you this gap of deficient demand, which is EP, is your deflationary gap also. So deflationary gap will occur in your economy. This is the gap I have drawn. So here this is the clear diagram I am showing because we have drawn also. So this is deflationary gap. Okay, this will happen. There will be depression or recession economy, take for example, nowadays after a corona pandemic, I can't say it is over yet, but yes, people are going outside, they are purchasing, but not in the numbers that happened previously before the corona pandemic. So people are buying or people are consuming goods in lesser amount. There is less demand in economy, and that's why more and more people are losing their jobs. That's why there are huge job cuts in every economy, may it be America, may it be India, China or elsewhere. There is lot of job cuts in economies of the whole world, and people all over the world are facing job cuts, and unemployment is rising in every type of economy owing to the deflationary gap, because demand is decreasing. Okay, and your demand is decreasing. Here demand has decreased by the extent EP, and your GDP is decreasing. Okay, then undesired stocks. See, if a producer produces 1,000 packets of something, and if demand falls, he won't be able to sell those packets of biscuits or bakery, anything like that we have already discussed. So in that case, what will happen? Demand for products is decreasing. So he will develop stocks. That means sales are not proper, and he is left with lot of packets of whatever he produces. So in that case, stocks will develop, undesired stocks, and that will cause losses to producers, loss of profits. And next point is loss of profits. When he will develop stock of commodities, stock is the amount of commodity that is left unsold with the producer. Okay, so loss of profits. If some of the commodities or lot of amount of his commodity is left unsold, what will happen? He will incur losses, and again there will be job cuts in economy. So there are a lot of job cuts in economy. There are a lot of losses owing to deficient demand. Now we move on to our excess demand. What is excess demand? See, when in any economy employment is very high, after full employment your excess demand occurs, and below full employment level, this is E is full employment level equilibrium, and when aggregate demand, planned aggregate demand is your less than or below your full employment level aggregate demand, your deflationary gap happens or occurs. And when it is above your full employment level aggregate demand, your excess demand will occur, surplus demand will occur, and it will lead to inflationary gap also. Let's discuss it over here. In this diagram, we can draw it above it, but here I am drawing it here. First, you can understand this nicely. See, here what is happening? We have taken point B, that is below aggregate demand at full employment level. Now we will take a point above this A, that is full employment level A, and we will name it as C. And on this C, what we can do? We can extend this. On this C point, we are drawing a line which intersects aggregate supply curve at, this is point G, and you can name it as H. What is happening over here? This H point is lying above full employment level, and here your gap is occurring between full employment level equilibrium and your equilibrium of your above aggregate demand, above full employment level, and this we can name it as ADP1. Why 1? Because this is also planned expenditure. What happens? We can see over here, when resources are fully utilized, then what happens? A wage spiral happens. Income of people increases. They demand more and more commodities in the market because they have high purchasing power. See, when my income was less, I used to purchase less commodities in the market. When my income increases, I keep on demanding more and more commodities, and that happens with every person. When their income increases, what happens? They buy more commodities or they demand more. And when people demand more, what happens? There are more sales. But we can see that our resources are already fully utilized and there are no resources left. When people are not left for employment, what will happen? Only prices will increase. Okay. See, for example, if India produces goods and services worth rupees 10,000 crore. 10,000 crore. Now, it has already utilized all its capacity, all the land, labor, resources and raw material. It can't produce more. It can't produce more. Then what will happen? When people are asking for more and more commodities, there is more competition amongst people. And they will compete amongst themselves to buy those commodities. And if commodities can't be produced, only their prices will increase. We can't increase production now. Production is static now. Production can't be increased because it is already at full employment level. Now only prices will increase. Prices will increase and this price increase will cause inflation in economy. Inflation, okay? Inflation will increase because no more production can happen. No more people are left with unemployment. So everyone is employed, everyone is working, everyone is having income. Okay, everyone wants more and more commodities, so they will compete for commodities and prices will increase. Here, draw a line, 45-degree line, that is aggregate demand, that is aggregate supply curve, income curve. Now draw a line that is aggregate demand at full employment level. And now you can draw a line above this aggregate demand at full employment level, and this is there. And this is aggregate demand at one, that is at more than full employment level, and this gap between the equilibrium of full employment level, that is E, and what we have named is as H. The gap between these two lines or aggregate demand at full more than full employment level and full employment level is known as inflationary gap. Inflationary gap or your excess demand. This is the curve. Now, excess demand. Excess demand, aggregate demand is excess when it is more than aggregate supply corresponding to full employment level. When your aggregate demand is more than aggregate supply at full employment level, it is known as excess demand. We have already discussed causes of excess demand are opposite to these causes of deficient demand. Here, reduction was happening in every case. Here you can write causes opposite to deficient demand. What are the causes? Causes of excess demand. Increase in private consumption expenditure, you can write here. Increase in private investment expenditure. Then increase in government expenditure. Increase in exports. Decrease in imports. Imports will decrease. And decrease in tax rates. So these two things will decrease. Both of them will decrease and all of them will increase. You can write the causes over here. I have not repeated the causes. Just you have to write the opposite causes over here. Now we need to see the consequences of excess demand. What happens when there is excess demand? Here, inflationary gap will occur. Inflationary gap, as we have seen, when aggregate demand is more than your aggregate demand at full employment level. It is more than that. This curve is above your full employment level aggregate demand. So what will happen in this case? Excess demand will happen and there will be inflationary gap. Okay, because your production cannot increase, all the resources are employed, so production cannot increase, only prices can increase, and with increase in prices, inflation happens. Now, static GDP, because production cannot increase, GDP will be static or stable, it cannot be increased. Now, excess demand wage price spiral, that is very important. Wage price spiral, that means wages and price move one after another. That is why, because when everyone is employed, they can negotiate for their wages with their producers or with their employers. When wages increase, more and more people increase their demand for commodities or goods and services in the market and other services. So what happens here? Production cannot be increased. Suppose, for example, a producer is producing 100 packets of bread. Now, if he is utilizing all his resources and he cannot increase his production, he can increase only the prices. First, he may increase his prices to 20 rupees per packet. to 25 rupees, then prices may increase to 28 rupees, then to 30 rupees or 35 rupees. And production cannot be increased. So what will happen? Only prices will increase, and with increase in prices, again people will demand higher wages. With higher wages, their purchasing power will again increase. They will buy more goods, prices will increase. Then again, when prices increase, people again demand higher wages from their employers. In this case, wage increase will lead to price increase, and price increase will lead to wage increase. In this case, in this scenario, wage price spiral will happen. Now, loss of profit. See, in this whole scenario, production houses are also losing. Why? Because they can't increase production. They only have to increase their prices. So here, loss of profit also happens to producers because they can't increase production with increase in demand. So I hope you have understood this topic. You only have to remember one thing in measurement of deficient and excess demand. This is only a point of one thing or one diagram, that is when your aggregate demand here, you need to see when your aggregate demand at full employment, this is full employment. When it's below, it is deficient demand, and when aggregate demand is above full employment level, it is excess demand. So I hope you have understood the topic only with the one diagram, and if you have not understood, please do write in the comments and ask us. We will be more than happy to answer them, and keep liking and watching our videos. Thank you so much.